might sound to summarize my own 12 to 13 years of thinking together, being together, doing politics, science, humanities in fascinating ways. And really, I feel that I owe a lot to this place and to the people that I've been working with. And I think that, in a way, we couldn't find a better book to talk about if we want to summarize those many years of thinking together. And I would like to relate to one specific issue within it. If life is a Kantian hammer, so I'm a geographer, a political geographer, so I think about space, I think about borders, I think about places. And in that sense, I think that one of the tensions that accompanied us along the years, I think that in all of the research groups, was the tension between thinking locally as a way of taking responsibility of the place in which we live, but also thinking about the place. Israel-Palestine is a laboratory of thinking about political concepts. Okay, I think you don't need to tell you this. So it means like thinking from the place, but on the other hand, it is clear that we didn't want to think about this place as sui generis, as even as a geographer, I don't want to think about the place as untranslatable. Okay, so this tension between global thinking and local thinking is something that I'm dealing with for many years, but I think that it also was part of the thought here in Minerva Humanities Center. And it's also one of, I think, the most urgent issues of the Anthropocene. Of how do we think about global issues when we are local creatures, but beyond that, we know that in the sense of responsibility, attachment, care, etc., we tend to think about our localities more than about globes. And therefore, I think that we all know that the most urgent to also refer to Arendt when she talked about the common world, so how to make the world a common world, how to make the globe something that is a place that we consider as home for all of us. But maybe I would like to suggest this is not the way to think. Maybe we don't need to think about the blue planet as our home, but thinking about dialectics of localism and globalism too. So this is my point of departure. And more precisely, the concept that is my point of departure in this short talk is Jürgen's idea of economy of knowledge. And the economy of knowledge, as I wrote, the relationship between knowledge and society with the help of this general concept of knowledge economy as the ensemble of practices and institutions by which societies produce and reproduce knowledge. Now, I would like to embrace this concept, but maybe add it a little twist, or maybe suggest another take, which is ecology of knowledge. And by ecologies, I would like to stress several points. First of all, ecologies always come in the plural. We cannot speak about an ecology. It is always about ecologies. Ecologies defy the idea of modern borders and boundaries. Ecologies are neighboring where they contain each other, contained by each other. They are codependent, co-fragile, and therefore we should always see their interrelationship and not only their internal way of production. They, of course, place specific sites, specific, I made this by saying that I'm a geographer, so this is what interests me. Also, the emphasis is on the multiplicity of actors, human, non-human, climate, soil, and all of these rich actors that we see in every and each ecology. So ecology is a combination of place, actors, practices, which are internally interdependent, but also always dependent on adjacent ecologies. And in order to illustrate the idea of thinking with ecologies of knowledge, I'd like to, and of course in the framework of Jürgen's book, but also of today's title, which is the Anthropocene. I'd like to refer to one part, one phase of the global crisis, which is the crisis of soils. We usually tend to talk about climate, but I'd like to talk about soils. And soil is always also a matter of place, of attachment, something that is very, very tangible. So I think that it serves better the point that I'd like to make. So first of all, just to mention a few facts. In 2015, a UN study declared that at the current rate of erosion and destruction, humanity has only 60 years of soil left. And actually, because it was in 2015, we only have 53 years left now. 53 years of soil, meaning 53 cycles of sowing and harvesting, and that's it. Now, it's we need to explain that not every land is regarded as soil. Soil is this thin layer of living and nutrient-rich layer that enables the existence of life on Earth. It is the fertile combination of geology and biology. And it is a very fragile layer. And actually, we as humans destroy it very, very quickly. A study that was published last year said that more than 1/3 of the soils globally are already destroyed beyond, they are unrepairable, actually. And the Anthropocene, when humans became a geological force, whose effects on the environment has already earned them the name Homo Destructor, is actually about also, not only, but desoilization. It is a desoilization in the physical sense of damaging the soils, but also in the epistemological way in which modernity itself is a kind of detachment from soil, distance from the soil, and just to relax you a little bit, since this study of 60 years of soil was out, many people arguing with it. We probably have at least 100 years, if not 60 years, and yet it is clear, the direction is clear, okay, that we are losing the soil is slipping underneath. And but so before we move forward, I'd like to take these questions of soil and place, and to I think that I thought maybe to give the lecture the title Behind the Scenes, scene like Anthropocene, Holocene, etc., etc. To talk about the politics of name giving. And Anthropocene, from the very birth of this concept, was criticized for talking about the anthropos in general and not about the question of what human beings actually do. Okay? So, and then other options were proposed, such as capitalocene, talking about capitalism as the main problem, meaning that the basic logic of consumption and production that needs always to produce and to consume more almost necessarily defies the balance of the natural spheres on the planet. But it was also criticized, other suggested technosphere, and to talk about carbon forms, and many, many different ways of finding the main reason, the most guilty factor in our age. And I'd like to refer to one findings. So so I very quickly I wanted to refer to one concept which is the plantation scene. The plantation scene refers to the colonial plantation as the basic logic of seeing, of organizing the world in a way. And we cannot really go into the detailed history of the colonial plantations, but what is important to point is some principal characteristics. The birth of the colonial plantation, which quickly became the global configuration of modern agriculture at large, lies in a combination of perceptions of inhabited spaces as terra nullius. We can see inhabited places as empty, in what is conceived as a rational cultivation that is always based on a large-scale industrialized mode of agriculture, tendency to monoculture, and reliance on slavery or mass hire of labor exploitation. Several scholars show how plantations have shaped the colonial worldview beyond the plantation itself, and how they have also created monocultures of knowledge, of race and practices and know-hows. The plantation form has been replicated globally while creating boundaries between knowledge and place, spreading uniform species, and uprooting anything that does not yield immediate profit. And this, in the context of soil, the significance of this monoculturism and industrial cultivation has been devastating, both physically in terms of soil depletion that has led to irreversible damage, but also socially in terms of commodification of soil and labor force, leading to massive dispossession, growing detachment from soils, both as a means of production and as a source of communal identity and attachment. And Latour, when he refers to this idea of plantation scene, says that he found this a concept, the most productive of all concepts, because it talks about the conceptual desoiling of the earth. And also that it's part of what explains for Latour why it is so hard for what he refers to resoiling, regrounding practice. It means, how do we rethink the connection to place and to soil as part of our practice of dealing with the global crisis of the environment. And desoilization is not only a physical move, but rather also a matter of practice, as been said by Latour. It is a way of thinking about the world. Modern pedology, the science of soil, is I think a great example of an economy of knowledge, as it is it relies on this basic logic of mass production, rational way of organizing plots, putting boundaries, understanding private lands, understanding control, and in a way, what several scholars point to today is that pedology is part of the problem and not part of the solution of how to save soils. And then, and I don't have the time to delve into it, there is a growing subdiscipline that is called ethnopedology that connects local knowledge the local know-hows to the general questions of understanding soil as part of a place-based, more than human way of practice. And but I'd like to summarize, because I guess I have like two minutes left. The fact that the crisis is global usually leads us to think that the solution should be global as well. That the power of science to cross state political boundaries and also to cross disciplinary boundaries is part of what we need to use in order to connect people, to save the planet together in a way that is more abstract than concrete. But what I would like to suggest is that the idea of ecologies of knowledge invites us to think about knowledge as something that can be, not only, but can also be produced locally. To think seriously about local knowledge, but locally doesn't mean, of course, chauvinistic nationalism. Okay, it doesn't mean that if I protect my own place, it means that I diverse all the pollution to other places, or that I buy carbon rights in order to keep my polluting practices. But rather to think about the world as a set of ecologies, and I will finish just with one last paragraph. In a critique of the common image of modern society as a network, we all know, when we think about society as a network, philosopher Peter Sloterdijk proposed the concept of foam. And it has like three rationales behind it. One, against the two-dimensional network, the foam offers three-dimensional cells, bubbles in different and varied sizes. Against the network that grows from the center outwards, and it is at least partly static, at least in the old parts, it spreads, but other parts stay static. Foam always moves, so it talks about processuality. Okay, it's always in a process of change. But most important, in front of the network image that connects autonomous points, even if in a complex way, the foam offers an image of codependency and co-fragility. The bubbles have at least one common wall with one another. Damage to one cell immediately affects the adjacent cells. So the ecological way of thinking about knowledge proposes the idea of thinking locally, but being aware of the co-fragility and codependency of ecologies and also of knowledges. And yeah, let's go and save the world. Thank you very much.